A criminal gang in Haiti has abducted 17 American and Canadian missionaries. The case highlights the lawlessness and chaos in one of the world's poorest countries. So, will this spur international action to help Haitian officials bring control? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed. Jamjoom. $1 million for each hostage. That's the ransom demanded by a criminal gang in Haiti for the release of 16 Americans and a Canadian abducted near Port-au-Prince last Saturday. The youngest hostage is just 8 months old. It's the latest in an increasingly violent wave of kidnappings in Haiti and has drawn international attention to the instability which has worsened since the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July. Haiti has lurched from crisis to crisis, from natural disasters to lawlessness and poverty. We'll bring in our guests in a moment. First, this report from Manuel Rapallo in Port-au-Prince.
Protests in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince. Demonstrators chanted liberation as they marched on the streets just north of the city, calling for the release of Christian missionaries.
This protest has been made for the Americans that they kidnapped, the camps American, because they kidnapped them. Because of them, we can do everything. Like, they pay their schools, like they pay our bills. So they do everything for us. So now, right now, they kidnap them and then we can do anything because they kidnapped them.
The kidnappers are demanding $17 million in exchange for 17 hostages, which include 5 children. The abduction of the 8 workers, one of whom is Canadian, is the largest of its kind in recent years. On Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken told reporters Washington is doing everything it can.
We have, in the administration, been relentlessly focused on this, including sending a team to Haiti from the State Department, in constant communication with the Haitian National Police, the church that the missionaries belong to, as well as to the Haitian government.
Following the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse in July and then a devastating earthquake in August, crimes like kidnappings, extortion, and violent attacks have intensified. More than 600 abductions were reported in the first 3 quarters of this year.
Though a joint effort by U.S. and Haitian authorities continues, issues like the worsening security situation, widespread fuel shortages, a lack of clear government leadership, and growing social unrest are proving to be major obstacles against efforts to free those kidnapped. Manuel Rapallo, Al Jazeera, Port-au-Prince.
Haiti has the world's highest number of kidnappings per person, and abductions have surged 300% since July. There have been at least 628 kidnappings since January, compared with 231 in the same period last year. The 400 Mapou gang is believed to be behind nearly 80% of the abductions in the past 3 months. The group kidnapped 10 people, including members of the Catholic Church, in April. And it's been growing in strength for the past 3 years. It now has nearly 150 members. All right, let's bring in our guests. In Washington, D.C., Eugenia Charles, a commentator and executive director at Fondasyon Mapou, which promotes Haitian culture, education, and human rights. In Doha, Francois Guillaume, the second ambassador of Haiti to Qatar. Also in Washington, D.C., Jake Johnston, senior research associate at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. A warm welcome to you all, and thanks for being with us today on Inside Story. Ambassador Guillaume, there's been this huge surge in the number of kidnappings in Haiti from last year to this year and just in the past few months. Why have kidnappings become so frequent there? What are the factors that have led to this?
Well, first of all, Mohammed, thank you for inviting me to Inside Story. And I'd like to start off first by expressing my heartfelt sentiment of solidarity to the families that are impacted by this horrible act, as it is for other Haitian families when this happens, a traumatizing event. And it is not testimony to the hospitality nature of Haitian people. Well, Mohammed, this is really a two-pronged issue. One, obviously, is a security issue, and the other one is a socio-economic issue. In terms of security, we have to bear in mind that Haiti, for the better part of the last 20 years, has had an international militarized force under the auspice of the United Nations. Now, for the most part, the United Nations supported the Haitian government in stabilizing Haiti throughout the years of instability in the past, but also to prop up our Haitian National Police. Now, that military presence, that UN military presence ended in 2017. And it was supposed to be handed over to the Haitian National Police to take over and secure the entire nation. Now, mind you, one of the reasons why we had to have support from the international community is because our army, our military army, was disbanded in 1995. So the Haitian National Police was left by itself to really, in 2017, to secure the entire nation. Now, as the rubber is hitting the road, everybody is realizing that our national police needs additional resources, needs additional support, but also support from perhaps another entity that could give that dissuasive presence to criminals. So this is one issue. The other socio-economic issue is the fact that it's a bigger issue, really. And it is in terms of, it's time that we put Haiti out of the HVS box. What I call the HVS box is the human veil syndrome box. Take it out of the human veil syndrome box. We need to have our international partners be more mindful of the need for investment and market capital financing, because Haiti cannot be reconstructed with humanitarian good deeds only. Mind you, we are very grateful for all our partners in times of humanitarian need, especially now after the earthquake. But in order for Haiti to have sustainable, equitable economic development, we need to have a mindset shift on the part of our partners and help us create jobs. Because those young men and women that are joining gangs right now are young men and women that have dreams and that want to be able to work, and they need to find an alternative to crime activities.
Eugenia, Charles, let me ask you, how much territory exactly do gangs control in Haiti right now? And what exactly do we know about this gang that's reported to have abducted the missionaries? I believe the name is 400 Mawozo.
Yes, the Mawozo group is in the Guadeloupe area, and also they control the Gantier area. But much of Port-au-Prince is being controlled by the gangs. From the Matissan area, I'm sure you've learned months ago, last years, when they moved almost the entire populations from the Matissan area. They are now homeless and living at shelters. The Lower Delma area, the Bel Air area is also controlled by gang. The Cité Soleil, La Saline, all these areas are controlled by gang. And even for the few branches of neighborhoods where the gangs are not yet infiltrated, people are still very much afraid because they have their fillers in different areas, monitoring for them what's going on into the community. I think we are facing a dire situation. It is unfortunate that American citizens got caught under fire and get kidnapped by this group. I hope that they are free very soon. But you need to also understand that the Haitian populations have been living in fear of every day since these Jovenel Moïse administration and leading back into the Martinique era. So kidnapping has taken over the population, and everyone is basically hostage. Every time someone leaves their homes in Haiti, everybody else by the door waiting for them to come home. Until the person enters the home, they don't know what will happen to them. And even when somebody is with a cell phone on the street, if you call the person, they don't respond. That in itself, you begin to worry very much. I believe we are at a very difficult moment. After 17 years of UN occupation, it is time that the Haitian populations are given an opportunity to take their destiny into their own hand. And at the same time, the US government has the possibility to stop the influx of gun that is entering Haiti on a regular basis.
Jake Johnston, a moment ago, Ambassador Guillaume was talking about how he believed that the concept of international aid when it comes to Haiti really needs to be rethought. Now, I want to ask you about this because you've written before about this. You've talked about how Haiti has become, I believe your term is, an aid state, meaning that Haiti has continued essentially to go on by getting billions of dollars from the international community, but that hasn't really helped the situation. It's further complicated that. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, I think, as the ambassador was talking about, this is also a socioeconomic issue, right? And, if we're looking at the root causes of this sort of, insecurity, it's the total absence of the state from huge parts of the country, the lack of opportunities that exist for people in Haiti. And so when we're talking about that, we have to talk about the role of the international community and the role of foreign aid. And this has been a pattern we've seen over many decades where traditional forms of assistance have actually hollowed out the state and undermined the ability of the state to provide for its citizens and to be present in its citizens' lives, which I think is a hugely important factor in sort of explaining all of this, but also goes to, what Eugenia was just saying around the need for Haitians to sort of take their own destiny into their hands. And that also involves the role of the international community in choosing Haiti's leaders and overthrowing Haiti's leaders, and in not allowing a sovereign democratic process to take place, which also undermines the government, right, and contributes to this. And so I think, moving forward, those are going to be hugely important things to look is this is not just an issue for Haitians or in Haiti, but also the role of the international community, specifically the United States.
Ambassador Guillaume, there has been discussion in international circles over the course of the last couple of months about the possibility of perhaps another peacekeeping mission returning to Haiti. This is an idea that seems to be floated in diplomatic circles. Do you think that that's something that would be acceptable to the government and to the people of Haiti at this point?
To the people, for Haitian people, and I think Ms. Charles just alluded to that earlier, we would really like to be able to have our own destiny in our own hands. We would rather have the support of the international community help us reinforce our police force and also our army that can also help in terms of dissuasive force, because the power of dissuasiveness is incredible. They don't have to necessarily be actful on every mission, but the mere fact that they are there is important. And it has been so for the entirety of our history. Haiti was born out of the coalition of armies to get our independence. So I know that the United Nations mission has renewed its mandate on October 15th. And within that mandate, there is language about supporting the Haitian police and helping Haiti support itself in terms of governance and security. We are hoping that some of those initiatives that we just spoke about reinforcing the police and reinforcing other security apparatus that we have would be part of that mandate.
Eugenia, Charles, Haiti was already faced with a very precarious security situation even before the assassination of President Moïse. How much worse, how much more has it deteriorated since he was assassinated?
Yeah, the insecurity, and I have to also note, since the United Nations have entered Haiti in 2004 after the overthrowing of former President Jamjoom, it's 17 years. Every time there's going to be a renewal sessions for the mandate of the UN missions here in Haiti to take place, there is always an increase in security issues, and the Haitian populations have always suffered the brunt of it. In terms of having another multinational forces come onto the ground, we do not need that. The UN has been in Haiti for 17 years. Nothing has been done. They're supposed to help with governance. We have the worst type of governance since the UNs have been here. And as you can see, Ms. Lalim, who represents Binu here in Haiti, praised the federations of the gang. So after 17 years, billions of dollars have been spent into these individual beings in the nations. We do not have a road that has been built. Our school infrastructure has gotten worse than they were before. The human rights situation has become deplorable. So in that sense, I will say that UN missions has failed. So there was no need for another renewal of 9 months for them to continue to be in the nations. They are not assisting us in protecting human rights. They are not assisting us in providing security to the populations. They are not assisting us in having good governments. It is nothing but another core group of occupations who dictates what the Haitians can do and cannot do. In order for Haitians to take their destiny in their own hands, I believe we need to leave them and it should be over. I think the United States wants Binu in Haiti because it's facilitated them to continue to maintain controls. The power struggle needs to end for Haiti to move forward with its destiny. We Haitians, we're going to have disagreements among ourselves, but we are fully capable of coming to sit and come to a solution. So long there continue to be money at play, so long there continue to be international forces who are supporting one group, neglecting another group, the crisis will not be resolved. The insecurity situation we have in Haiti can be resolved. The Haitian government is fully aware of the 26 families who are ordering weapons, who are providing weapons to these groups. They need to take action and arrest these people, put them behind bars, hold them accountable. At the same time, the United Nations and the US particularly need to stop the influx of guns that is coming from the United States. And with these things resolved, then we'll be able to look at the other challenges that we have. I know they are pushing for elections. We don't have any space for elections right now with the current insecurity when we cannot even provide security for regular citizens to go out on the street to buy foods to feed their family.
Jake Johnston, you know, this is in the news right now because you have many Americans and one Canadian who were kidnapped. But this is a daily reality for Haitians, is it not, this issue of kidnapping? I mean, more and more Haitians have to deal with this reality every single day, correct?
Yeah, of course.
And how fearful are they?
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll go for it. Well, I just wanted to pick up on this idea of international security assistance, right? And I think, you know, regardless of whether, you know, this is not an issue that's solely going to be resolved through security, whether it's, you know, a new multinational force or even support to the police. And when you talk about what's happened over the last number of decades, you've seen billions of dollars spent by the UN and the US to train the national police. And, you know, it's a bit insane to think that more money going to the Haitian National Police alone is going to solve this problem. And I think, as Eugenia is mentioning, you have to get to the sort of roots of the problem here, which is that these are not necessarily independent actors. You know, armed groups have political patrons, they've got private sector patrons, they get their guns from somewhere. Going after these networks of support, you know, would be a far more effective way than simply, you know, funneling more resources into a police institution, which itself has been part of the problem, right? And that's exactly the issue here. We've had a police force that's been politicized and still receiving millions of dollars from the international community. That model has failed.
And Jake, just to follow up with you, how big of a problem is guns coming in from America?
Oh, it's a huge problem. I think there's very little data, but I think it's pretty clear that the vast majority of weapons that are entering Haiti are likely coming from the United States. There have been a number of cases, but again, control of the ports. And I think when you're looking at what the international community can do, what the US can do, enforce its own laws, right? Like Eugenia is saying, crack down on the arms trafficking, investigate the financial ties. Where's all this money going? What about the private sector actors who all have assets in the US that are funding money and giving money to these gangs to carry out some of this activity? So looking at those areas and holding people actually accountable, you know, I think could be a far more effective approach. Ambassador
Guillaume, you know, Jake Johnston just alluded to this about the billions of dollars that have come in aid to Haiti. We're talking about more than $13 billion of aid that's flowed into Haiti since 2010, since the earthquake in 2010. But there has been so little development to show for this. In the meantime, you have the police force that many say is weaker than the gangs. You have a government that's in a very weakened state. Why is this the case, and what can be done to turn things around?
Well, Mohammed, one has to keep in mind that out of the 13 billion in pledges, it's not actually 13 billion that was dispersed. Out of the 13 billion in pledges after the earthquake, a very small percentage was given to the Haitian government or Haitian apparatus to reinforce its capacities. The majority of it went through much needed humanitarian aid, like shelter and food and medicine. But we're not gonna hash down exactly all the mistakes that were done after the 2010 earthquake, but there was quite a bit of duplication of NGOs doing certain things that not needed to be done. The government had a very clear reconstruction plan, and it was very seldom taken into account by both donors and NGOs when dispersing funds. So again, I'm going back to our security apparatus. If we had an internal security apparatus like the army, we would be better able to control our borders so that the inflow of illegal arms would be curtailed. And I'd like to bring up another thing, because I believe politicization of the certain factions in Haiti. There's a Pandora's box that was open. The Pandora's box was open in terms of the politicized of criminal activities. And it's been open in a period where there are some deep political cleavages that are being mended, that have been tried being mended for the past few years. And all of this in a context of a political environment that has not been conducive to resolving those political cleavages. So when you have the politicizers of criminal activity that ultimately led to the assassination of a sitting president, and you have a police force that with all its valiant efforts is not able really to fully take care of the problem currently at hand, then we really need to rethink how we invest billions of dollars in Haiti. And we need to, most of all, we need to listen to Haitian people, whether it's the Haitian government or the Haitian people that are telling international donors, this is what we need. When we say this is what we need, it's because we have first-hand experience and knowledge of the matter. So I hope that the same mistakes are not done again when the public sector is assessing the needs that it needs to be taken into consideration.
Eugenia, Charles, you heard Ambassador Guillaume there talking about the political situation in Haiti. Let me ask you about the political environment in the country. Just how volatile does it remain? And are the police there completely powerless at this point?
The situation is extremely volatile for everyday citizens. No one knows what's going to happen to them when they go out. In a moment, demonstration can strike, people can lose their life in a second. The citizens who are out, when they venture out, they go in fear. Everybody is looking over their shoulder. It's a new way of life for Haitians who are not used to those kind of situations. In terms of the police, we understand they lack resources. Yes, the U.S. have provided a lot of training to them. The U.S. has provided a lot of money. But we have to also say no director of police get nominated in Haiti unless Pentagon and the State Department approve that individual. So really, how can we be a truly sovereign nation when our own police director cannot be selected by the Haitian people? So therefore, when you have a police director here, they are more responsible to respond to whatever demand the U.S. have than responding to the need of the Haitian populations. And looking at the police, we don't have sufficient police officers to provide security for the entire Haitian population. Combined with that, the few police that we have, the majority of them are detached with politicians and members in the different ministry cabinets to provide them security, provide their family security, which leave very few police officers to actually provide security to the citizens who are living in fear on a regular basis. So if the government wants to do something constructive, they need to reduce the number of police officers that are attached to ministers and their wives to make more police officers available to provide security to the Haitians who are living in terror on a daily basis. And the resources, and we know there are a lot of state vehicles that are being used to do kidnapping. The government needs to get a handle of their cars and who's utilizing them in ways to terrorize the population and put an end to that.
All right, well, we have run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Thanks so much to all of our guests, Eugenia Charles, Ambassador Francois Guillaume II, and Jake Johnston. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed, Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.